We're doing some changing. We are now available, the programs are now available on Ustream, a streaming technology that allows us to save and catalog and have back shows available for you to watch. And the easiest way I found to go to Ustream and find these shows to watch them if you're of interest, have curiosity, is to just go to either Ustream, The Next Step TV SB, or Google search The Next Step TV SB, The Next Step TV SB. Be sure you get the TV SB in. Also, as in the past, my email address is on the screen at times, and if you have any questions, as a few people have, I'd enjoy having you send me email questions or comments or suggestions about what the next show should be. Good. So, Bud, here we go. Just in time for the holidays, so to speak, as it were. The U.S. Supreme Court this last week heard a case that they took out of Greece, New York, in which the City Council of Greece, New York, like many city councils around the nation, government agencies, had a tradition and a habit of allowing, or encouraging actually, not just allowing, but encouraging and going out and aggressively finding people, chaplains, religious people to come in and have prayers and invocations before the beginning of the commencement. What's interesting about, in this case, was then this practice was objected to by some non-Christians, and that went to court. Interesting, it was decided in the lower courts that the practice of the Greece City Council was in violation of the First Amendment about establishment of religion, and the lower courts had thrown out the process because there was overt action on the part of the city to secure only, apparently almost only, Christian participants in this benediction. But the Supreme Court, on its own, decided to hear this. And those of you who don't understand this should be aware. When the Supreme Court wants to decide an issue, they will go find a case that gives them the platform, unfortunately sometimes the bad facts that they want in order to write a decision that they're really headed toward. This Greece decision has the potential to undo 40 and 50-year history of case law in the United States, which says that the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment prohibits this type of embroilment in religious activities officially. What bothers me about it, and this is, we've talked about this before, but is that the Obama administration has filed a brief on behalf of the city of Greece, saying that their practice is acceptable and seemingly to support the idea that governments should have more freedom to impose sectarian religious processes upon the public, because the public's present at these hearings.
Flies right in the face of the First Amendment.
It does, it seems to. So it bothers me that the Obama people and the Holder have once again gone against what I think is certainly the liberal tradition, much less the progressive or historic tradition of the Democratic Party, which I thought was supposed to be against having religious tests and processes. But so it's interesting to go back and discuss and think about the beginning of this. This began in the United States with a bunch of people called the Founding Fathers who were not religious.
That's so true. So very few people realize that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Tom Paine, and the James Madison, and
John Adams.
They were not religious people, and they kept it out of our Constitution. Many people do not realize that religion is not, the term God and Christ are not in the Constitution.
No, and in fact there was specific effort to include a religious acknowledgement in the Constitution, and it was rejected by the members of the Constitutional Convention. And later on we passed the First Amendment that said that you have freedom of religion, and government should not be involved in establishment or helping of religions. On top of which, we have a specific clause in the Constitution. Almost nobody in this country, outside of the lawyers, even thinks about, there's a specific clause that says there shall be no religious test for any office in this nation. You cannot deny or require somebody to be a member of any particular religion in order to be elected or participate in the government and citizenship in this country. So yeah, in fact, at the Constitutional Convention, Ben Franklin apparently had the idea that they were having such squabbles in the fight over writing the Constitution that maybe they should call somebody in to have them give a prayer to the Almighty, whom, by the way, Ben Franklin didn't think was an activist almighty. He was a deist. He believed that there was a originating cause in the universe, but it had very little to do with everyday human affairs. But anyway, so he made a motion to try to get them to have a chaplain come in and make these prayers. Only 3 or 4 votes were on his side. It failed miserably, 75 to 3 or 4. They didn't want it. And what was interesting is Alexander Hamilton got up and made a snide remark. He said he didn't want any foreign aid coming into their deliberations. And the idea that there should be God involved in this, and his sarcastic comment was foreign aid coming into the convention. So it was pretty interesting. But over the years, we've had this historical reversion to the idea that the Founding Fathers were religious. And it's just frightening. Some of the quotes we've got here, James Madison: religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise.
Excellent.
During almost 15 centuries, the legal establishment of Christianity has been on trial, and what have been its fruits? More or less in all places, pride and indolence in the clergy, ignorance and servility in laity, and in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it wasn't Jefferson. I have examined all the known superstitions of the world, and I do not find in our particular superstition of Christianity one redeeming feature. They are all alike, founded on fables and mythology. George Washington, the first president, was more moderate in these views, but in his one of the very first things that the Congress got involved when Washington became president was a fight in Tripoli over piracy. They were taking American ships and sailors captive and trying to keep them held. And when they tried to negotiate a treaty with Tripoli, Tripoli said, well, no, you guys are a Christian nation, that we're going to be at war with you all the time and all that. We passed a treaty, Washington negotiated it, and eventually signed by John Adams, and it contained the language in that treaty that, and unanimously passed by the Senate. The government of the United States is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion. I mean, these are irrefutable historic facts about how the Founding Fathers and Congress and the government was begun, and yet today we have this nonsense that this is quote-unquote a Christian nation.
Yeah, and it keeps appearing in the written and verbal utterings of the leaders that we are a Christian nation, and obviously our forefathers did not envision that we would be a Christian nation, and that's logical, because as soon as you get religion and look at what happens now in Iraq, they are slaughtering each other. You got just 2 wings of the Muslim religion, and it also happened in the Christian in North Ireland.
Oh, the history of the world has been told by religious wars.
Yeah.
And the worst wars are religious wars.
Yeah.
I do not know, and I've made this offer in the past. If somebody can come to me and tell me of one event where war has been stopped by a religious leader, and peace has been obtained by religious intervention, or understanding, I would love to hear it, and I would love to buy that person lunch for telling me this. But
Excellent
but
point.
even if it has happened on some minor occasion somewhere, maybe, I don't think it happened to my lifetime, but it's more often it's the leaders of the religion that are leading the war. As you mentioned, the Protestants and the Catholics in Ireland. My ancestors, you know, or the Sunnis and the Shia, or the Kurds, or in Southeast Asia right now, we have the Buddhists, who are considered to be, my bias is the Buddhists are peaceful, loving peoples, very nonviolent by religious training. They're killing Muslims, and burning them out of their houses, and burning them out of towns, and throwing them into the river, and driving them out of their communities, because they don't trust the Muslims not to. I mean, each of them. Or in Africa, where we see this every week, every day in the news in Africa, where various Muslim tribes are fighting with various Christian tribes, with various non-sectarian tribes.
And happening in Egypt, the Coptic Christians are being, me and the smaller group are being oppressed, but still they also kill Muslims. So somehow or other, the general population of countries get into this, my religion is the correct religion, or my denomination of the basic religion is the correct one, and the others just have to be destroyed.
Well, so what? How is it? I mean, I understand. I mean, to be. I don't know if fair isn't the right word, but to be respectful of the other side in this kind of debate. When a group says this is a Christian nation, if they're saying, well, a majority of the population of the country, United States, is of Christian belief, I don't think we could argue too much about that. Surveys say that about 51 or so percent of the population is of Protestant Christian tradition, 25 or 26% is of the Catholic Christian tradition, so 70 or so percent of the population is self-identified as being Christians. But I think the Founding Fathers understood that that was not the issue. The issue wasn't what the majority felt. It was what the minority had a right to expect. And the evils, as I just read in one of these quotes, of a belief that you are the holder of the truth, and that your side has information about truth that the other side needs to accept or die. I mean, that's where these evils come from. And it is scary to think that our schools have not taught this, that our politicians are so easily pandering, are so quick to pander to these forces. So how is it that for 250 years we've managed to be basically outside of this, but is there an underlying understanding in the American psyche that it is a bad idea to have a Christian country or a religious country at all?
Just unbelievable. And look what's happening in Iraq now. Saddam Hussein had he was a dictator, no question about that, and he was the leader of Iraq, and yet his half of the I shouldn't say half, but his religion was Sunni, and the Shiites were the majority in there, and by his dictatorship was able to keep them separate without killing each other. Granted, he probably on political appointees and so on leaned to the Sunnis, but as soon as we got in there, we managed to separate them in a killing mode. A killing mode.
Yeah. Well, it is those throughout the world, we see these examples. So where is the Obama administration going? Where is the Supreme Court going? Where are these decisions going to leave us in the near future? And what bothers me about it, if the Supreme Court is using this City of Greece case to tolerate greater involvement of secular religion, I mean of particular religious belief systems in government, we are going to end up in some real mischief. And we've already seen one of the areas where this mischief is starting to rear up, and that's in these attacks about corporations and businesses that don't want to fund health care for employees that are engaged in behaviors that the employer, the corporation, disapproves of. So we have this situation where if, a pending case in which a Hobby Lobby chain of stores, a corporation, closely held, but a corporate body, has saying that we are not going to provide health insurance for our employees that allows them to have contraception or birth or abortion services, because we personally are offended by this. If the court tolerates in this Greece case a greater involvement of sectarian belief systems in government, I can see them coming into this area and saying, oh yeah, a corporation which they've already held in Citizens United as a person can also say people who work for it can't have certain kinds of care. What would be next? Well, I mean, next to me would be the people who work for us can't smoke cigarettes, or the people who work for us can't eat pork, or the people who work for us. I mean, think about this.
It opens up a Pandora's box of things that the employer can hold over the employee, and in effect get a group of people that follow their religious belief and so on.
Well, I mean, it could be political beliefs too. I mean, it seems to me that if the First Amendment encompasses not just religious protection, but freedom of speech and assembly and, and communication. So, I mean, if a corporate body is able to use religious tests about things like what kind of insurance their employees have under a program that their corporation funds, then they could certainly, it seems to me, start imposing rules about what kind of schools their children, their employees.
Absolutely, it would be a wedge in the open door to.
Well, yeah, it's frightening.
To completely control the employee and all of the employee's rights under our Constitution.
Or whether they pay taxes for schools that teach evolution. Now in Texas, we saw these school boards down there who don't want to teach, who want non-evolutionary silliness taught at least equal to science. And I just see a corporation in Texas saying, I'm not going to pay taxes to a school district that teaches things that are against my belief system. So I'm scared that I'm worried that the Obama administration would ignore the historic position of the federal government, which has been to fight for the separation of church and state, as Jefferson famously wrote. And he was the author of this. He knows what it meant. And tolerate a little more, increasingly more religious behavior by government agencies. This began, this isn't the first time this has happened. Back in the mid-1800s, there was also an attempt to break down this wall. There was a group called the National Reform Association, NRA of its time. I just found about this recently. I didn't know about this myself too much, but they wanted a Christian nation amendment. Yeah, at least they recognized that the existing Constitution was not a Christian nation constitution. So they went out and tried to get Congress to to support and pass an amendment to the Constitution that would say it was overtly, and that Jesus Christ, I think what they call it, the Jesus Christ as the ruler among the nations, and his revealed will as the supreme law of the land. Now, they wanted that in our Constitution back in the mid-1800s. The Senate never got it out of committee. Does that sound a bit like Sharia law?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And people fail to realize that the reason the Europeans came over to our country was because of religious persecution in their own countries. And to then turn around and have our country do just exactly what the original settlers came over to this country to get away from.
Well, yeah, and as the point I was just making, you see, I don't know why people who want quote unquote religion and want this nation to follow religious precepts, the Christian precepts, don't get it when they have such hostility and vilification and anger about Sharia law. All across the country we see these local governments passing resolutions saying that they will have no Sharia law in their state or in their city. Not that anybody's actually pushed for it, but they don't want it. And yet this constitutional amendment of the mid-1800s was, we're going to interpret everything under the teachings of Christ, is no different than Sharia law, which says that you interpret everything in the teachings of Muhammad and the Quran. And you have religious scholars who will then interpret and apply what they think was the intention of Christ or Muhammad or somebody else. So why have we lost this perspective about the benefits of keeping religion out of our public life in America today, or have we? I mean, maybe there's just enough. Maybe it's just that the thing gets stirred up, and maybe we won't see any changes. But it does scare me when the liberal Democratic administration allegedly supports a city's efforts to engage in sectarian religious indoctrination of the council and the audience that comes to those council meetings for other business.
So many cases have gone before the courts, or were not gone before the courts because a group writes to them and tells them that, look, what you propose to having a prayer before a city council meeting is in opposition to our First Amendment, which says there shall be no establishment or oppression of religion, but it will separate that wall which Jefferson put up between church and state should be kept. But there are still loads of communities out there, particularly in the South, that just will keep on trying to wheedle in a prayer, and generally a Christian prayer, before council meetings.
Well, it's not just the council meetings. Yes, but they ignore. I mean, these are. I don't want to use too general terms, but no, I mean the Tea Party types, who historically have believed in original. The will of the Founding Fathers. They go back and they want to read the arguments of the Founding Fathers and the papers of the Founding Fathers, and they want to apply. I mean, we have on the Supreme Court Justice Scalia, who's famous for original intent. He wants to go back and look at the Americas of the 1780s and 1790s, and when they wrote this stuff, and think, okay, what do they mean by that word then? And that's what we should be holding it to today. Well, if you go back and do this analysis, these were deists. These were people who did not believe in an intervening activist God. They were not. The first 5 or 6 presidents of the United States weren't Christians. They ridiculed the Trinity, the idea of the Trinity, which is a basic definition of Christianity. They're Unitarians or deists. They only believed in a single God without all this other stuff. Very few of the Founding Fathers had active religious roles, and And they were, as I mentioned in these quotes and many others that are available, overtly hostile to the history of religion in Europe and what it had done to the people of Europe. And like you say, they came here to keep, and this is the other side of this coin that we don't tend to think about. The pilgrims and the really religious refugees came here because they were fed up with government running religions and having government religions tell them what to think and do.
Yeah.
And now their successors, or at least some of them, are trying to accomplish that same event here. After 200 and some years, they now want these refugee religions, these these religions who hated government, now to be in charge of another type of government religion in this country. It's frightening.
And sadly enough, they, as I pointed out, they keep trying to introduce religion into government. And even though they should know by reading that the Constitution forbids that, and yet they keep
well, they've been successful.
picking at it.
They've been successful in some areas. The United States prohibits the use of American foreign aid for birth control and certain kinds of preventative care for women outside the United States. That's based on a religious principle. It's not based on a health principle.
No.
And that's so they've intruded in many areas already. We have an increased pressure to allow people to create charter schools or other schools that are private schools, but then are free to teach religious values, religious education on using taxpayer money, that kind of thing.
I could never understand how they could get money to religious schools, and even down to the point of having the public schools bus service pick up religious people, kids, and transport them to a religious school. I could never understand that, but that did get through, and they're allowed to do that.
Increasingly, over the last 5 or 10 years or 20 years, we've been seeing these inroads. So I'm worried about this case. We're running out of time now, but just want to go back and say, follow this City of Greece case. Be questioning about why the Obama administration is on what I think is the wrong side of it, and hope that the Supreme Court doesn't completely capitulate to this idea that people have a right to have religions run their government.
Yeah.
So we're about to end up. Again, thank Ali and Juanita and Liz for their work in the back, and we'll see you all in a couple weeks on another show.
Thanks, Glenn.